Welcome to the What Was Good podcast with Zach and Schuyler. On this episode, we'll be discussing some movies, a book, and some music from the year 2003. We'll talk about the Oscar Best Picture Award nominees, Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, Lost in Translation, Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World, Mystic River, and Seabiscuit. Then we'll talk about the National Book Award winner for fiction, Shirley Hazzard's The Great Fire. And finally, you'll hear our discussion of the Grammy Award winner for Album of the Year, Outkast's Speakerboxxx, and The Love Below. If you want to get in touch with us and let us know whether we're right or wrong about any of these things, feel free to reach out by email at whatwasgoodpod@gmail.com. And remember, if you include your address, your physical, in real life mailing address, I'll send you a handwritten postcard. If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter, you can find us at whatwasgoodpod or on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/whatwasgoodpod. Now, enjoy our conversation about the great year of 2003. Hey, Zach.
Hey.
Do you remember when The Onion used to publish a physical newspaper? Like you could go pick it up?
I do remember that. Yes.
Do you remember Jim Anchower, one of their opinion writers? Well, he was a character.
Yeah, but that name does not ring a bell.
Well, he's this kind of loser stoner guy, and he started every article or every little thing that he wrote with, "Hey guys, I know it's been a long time since I rapped at you, but I've been going through a lot of stuff, and I've been really thinking about him when it comes to this podcast, because it's been a while since we rapped at you."
Yeah, and we've been going through some stuff, probably, kind of. So yeah, well, it's fitting. Man, I need to get back into The Onion. No, they still make digital copies, or maybe not.
No, they do. It's just it's not the same.
It's not what it used to be.
Yeah. So why has it been so long since we rapped at each other?
Oh man, let me count the ways. No. So I've been going through a few things. I had been looking for a job, no longer looking, now gainfully employed again for what I believe to be a fantastic situation for myself, back into what I've always loved doing. I'm now an education coordinator. That sounds really fancy title.
Whoa.
Yeah, it sounds fancy, and I don't know, it'll be a great job. I work at a children's museum now, so it's really cool. And
dude,
yeah, I get to help organize a whole education department. It's a small museum, but it's really cool, and I'm loving it so far. And so that's why, main reason for myself that I haven't been around.
If you're the education coordinator, does that mean you have educators that do what you tell them to do?
We're working on that, but yes, I saw essentially it's tier structure, and I have people underneath me, which feels really weird because I've never been in that situation.
You're the boss.
I wouldn't go that far. No, there's names above mine still. So
well, I mean, yeah, sure, but wow. So how long have you been doing that now?
So it's just been a week now. I started this last Tuesday, and it's a little different than sitting around looking for jobs and not working, but
yeah,
I love it.
Probably a bit more satisfying, I would imagine.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Nobody cares what I did on my Minecraft world. That was a lot of my time was spent in Minecraft and other things. Well, not employed.
Probably some Roblox in there too.
Oh yeah. My son every day has got to ask for Roblox time. I can only take so much of that though.
I've got a kid who has gotten really into Resident Evil. Have you ever played any of those games?
I know about them. Never really played any myself, though.
Yeah, that's same. Apparently, they're it's one of those zombie things. Yeah. I don't know exactly. There's zombies, and you have to shoot them, and there's some guy named Leon.
Okay.
Anyway, She's very, very into those right now. Probably more so than schoolwork.
That's fair. I mean, who wants to
Yeah,
do that?
absolutely. That's fair. Yeah. High school sucks.
Oh, I've got another year before ours first one is technically in high school, but yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get a new job, but I did go to Sweden.
Whoa, Sweden. I've never been there.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I went to the work conference in Stockholm, which was fine. But Stockholm's a pretty cool city. I walked around a lot, got my 15,000 steps in, went to a
Nice.
movie theater that's been there since 1923 or something like that to see Friday the 13th on Friday the 13th. Have
Of course, yes.
you ever seen that movie?
Oh, yeah. It's been a long
Like the
time.
original one?
Yes, the original one. I have seen it. It's been years and years, of course.
So, spoiler alert for anybody listening that hasn't seen it, there's no freaking hockey mask in it.
Sad.
Yeah, like I don't know the lore of Friday the 13th, right? So I go to this movie and I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're going to get Jason, he's going to have the hockey mask." No, he's not in it at all practically, and there's no damn hockey mask.
That is unfortunate, but
I left that movie theater so disappointed. So disappointed that I went back the next day to see a different movie.
and what'd you see it? Wait, were these in English?
Friday the 13th was in English with Swedish subtitles, so that was fine. The next night, I went to see the 1927 silent movie Metropolis, one of the most influential movies of all time. I'd never seen it before. It was a little difficult because the text on the screen, the inner titles, is in German, and they had subtitled those inner titles in Swedish. So fortunately, cinema is a visual medium, so most of the information I needed from a silent movie was on the screen in terms of what's going on, but I think, probably miss some key themes and ideas that were there, but it was fun anyway.
Yeah, that was, I mean, a 1927 movie. You're talking 100 years old almost. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's really cool because I bet that this movie, when it was new, showed in this exact same theater.
Ooh, that's weird to
Because the
think
theater
about.
was built in 1923, and it's got like a red curtain in front that still rises before the show, and all these balcony seats around the edge. It was a really, really cool old theater. So I'm not going to remember much from the conference in a few years from now, but I will definitely be remembering that theater.
Yeah. Speaking of other languages and things like that, so almost a year ago, about 11 months ago, my son and I started watching One Piece, the epic anime with over 1,100 episodes to it.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Wait, what?
Yeah, 1,100 episodes of One Piece, the pirate themed anime.
So 1,100 episodes. That's more than The Simpsons.
Oh, easily. Started in 1999. Still, to this day, every week a new episode is coming out. It's based on a manga from Japan, obviously, and so they still are releasing new episodes every week. And so they're close to 1,200 episodes now, I think. So when we started this, we were watching it like crazy. We are now up to the point where they have not done English dubs yet. Up till this point, they were doing everything we had watched had been dubbed in English, and we had gotten so used to the English voice actors, but we caught up. We are now like at episode 1,110 or something like that now, and we've got to the point where it's only the Japanese with English subtitles is what we have. So to correlate with what you were saying about language, we're now watching a Japanese show with English subtitles. At least we got the English subtitles. But
I still can't get over the 1,100, almost 1,200 episodes. That's nuts.
it is.
I mean, it must be good, right?
It is good. Yeah. Okay. So it started with my son and I, but it has now become my daughter and I. My son lost interest after maybe 15, 20 episodes, and my daughter kind of picked up about that time. And so now it's been every night we watch 2 or 3 episodes and catch up.
So I'm really curious to understand the decision-making process that goes into starting. Because when I'm, scrolling through Netflix or Hulu or whatever, and I see, oh, that's a show I've been wanting to watch. Oh, 5 seasons, 40 episodes. Nah, that's too much investment. I don't want to do it. And yet here you are willing to start a 25-year-old show that's still going on with over 1,000 episodes. What are you thinking?
So I'm the exact opposite. If I get on Netflix and I 3 episodes for 36, or 3 seasons, 36 episodes, I think I'm going to be done with that in a couple weeks and I'm going to need something new. So I prefer the epics of long. I got this for a year worth of watching, and that's where we're at. We're about to hit a year, and we're going to be caught up by the end of by 1 year of. So that kind of tells you how many we watch, or how much we watch this.
Well, I mean, these are what, like 20-minute episodes?
Yeah, about. And we usually skip the intro and the outro, and so, yeah.
Sure, so you're watching a reel efficiently.
Yes,
what you're saying.
Yeah, we take the episodes down to about 18 and a half, 19 minutes, and yeah. But, so yeah, with that being the case, and then we're almost caught up, my daughter was like, I'm going to need a new anime to watch. So on her own, she's now watching Naruto as well, which is like 700 episodes.
I hear good things about Dragon Ball.
Yeah, that one's on the list of possibilities as well.
My daughter liked My Hero Academia for a few years. That's another one that's got quite a few.
Yeah, that was recommended by a friend of mine as well. And Jujutsu Kaisen or something like that. There's lots of them, but yeah.
More than you could ever watch in a lifetime. I would have thought until I found out that you're now 1,100 episodes into one. So maybe you could pull it off.
Who knows? I'm getting old, so who knows? But
well, you know what else is getting old? The stuff that we're going to talk about this week.
Every week that goes by.
I keep being blown away that 2003, that's a really weird way to say it, sorry, 2003 is like 21 years ago.
I know. That's
old enough for a beer.
Yes, these movies can drink now, and yes. Some
of them make me want to. Oh boy.
Only one of them made me want to drink, but we'll get into that. So
yeah, so today we're talking about the award-winning movie, book, and music album from 2003, as well as the other Best Picture nominated movies, the ones that were nominated and didn't win, which is good because the one that won we already talked about.
Yes.
It was, of course, Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, which we dedicated almost an entire episode to.
Because it was, well, it's a little weird situation with it being the last of a 3-movie or trilogy, essentially, and none of the other ones really getting any awards until this one. But yeah, we dedicated quite a bit of time to talking about what we consider one of the best movies of a long period, at least. At least I do.
Best of the 21st century. It's on that list for sure.
Yes, I agree.
And I do want to point out to anyone listening, specific people listening, that I was fact-checked by some people close to me, also known as my wife, about some of my memories of 2003 and how foggy and not quite accurate they were. I'll just leave it at that.
But you did have a valid excuse for why things might have been foggy in 2003.
Well, with the newborn baby, yeah, it's fine.
That's an excuse for anybody. So
yeah, my feelings about the movie aren't changed, but some of the events surrounding its release and the seeing it in the theater may not have been 100% accurate. But that's
your wife's the only one who will ever really know.
Well, now all of our listeners will.
Well, they don't know exactly which facts were inaccurate.
All right. All right. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, we're not really going to be talking about the actual award winner, Best Picture for 2003, because we already did. It's an A.
Yeah. Oh,
Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. We were in complete agreement on that one. It's not every time we agree, but yeah, that one is just great. I mean, there's not even much left to say about it. We spent quite a lot of time talking about it, and it was just amazing in every way.
So what else do we got then?
So, I guess the first one we're going to talk about is Mystic River, I didn't write down actor, or I didn't write down director and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you have all that.
Yeah, so this was Mystic River was directed by Clint Eastwood, actually.
That makes sense. I do remember seeing that now.
Starring Sean Penn, Tim Robbins, and Kevin Bacon in the lead roles of the three buddies.
Okay, so I did. Now that I'm looking at my notes more carefully, I do see that I wrote down those names at least. Man, okay, so getting into the whole premise of this movie, it starts with a kind of a flashback to their childhood and some kind of dark stuff that happened when they were kids, and then he jumps forward to as adults and what they're going through with their life. And it's Sean Penn's daughter is murdered, and there's evidence showing one way or the other. There's a lot of different things going on, and it's kind of the story of all three characters. Sean Penn, with it being his daughter, Tim Robbins was the police officer, correct?
No, that was Kevin Bacon. Tim Robbins was the kind of weirdo.
Yes, the one who something really bad happened to when he was a child. But so then they all have their kind of role, and they're all still friends and communicate with each other, and how the movie plays out with their relationship to each other, and just kind of it was a dark movie. That's that's one way to put it, but interesting at least.
Yeah, definitely dark. This was a rewatch for me, but again, it had been probably since 2004.
Yeah.
When I rented this from Blockbuster and took it home and watched it. So, this was almost like a fresh watch. Some of the things were a little bit familiar, particularly around the very ending of the movie, which, it gets super dramatic. And then, but I didn't like this movie, to be honest. Here's the first sentence I wrote down in my notes. Turgid, obvious, painful dialogue and expository writing really hold this one back. And that is just like, that's how I feel about the movie. Especially Kevin Bacon, early on and throughout the whole movie, is given the worst, stupidest dialogue to say. Like, stuff that is painfully obvious to the story. Like, you don't need to say that.
Yeah.
We can see it on the screen. And then also he gets this strange side B plot about his ex-wife or current wife who left him, and it keeps being brought up and it never matters.
I didn't really understand that side of things. Like, who cares? Like, she had nothing to do with anything until for some reason at the end of the situation that happened with the daughter being murdered, she all of a sudden is back and wants to reconcile. It just didn't matter to the plot at all.
Right. Yeah, it was so strange. And I guess it's like backstory for why he's mopey and sad. I don't know.
Could be.
The whole writing just really threw me off. The one thing that didn't, and I guess it makes sense, is that Sean Penn was acting his ass off.
He really was.
I think he ended up winning the Oscar, right?
I believe that sounds right, yes. And somebody can fact check us if that's wrong, but that makes sense. He did it. He was great in this. My first note, while not quite as eloquent as yours, was there was no joy or happiness in this movie anywhere.
No, there was not.
I looked for something. There was just nothing positive that ever happened, and it was just dark and dreary. But I mean, it told the story at least, but it was hard to watch at times.
Even when the killer is revealed, it's just even more depressing.
Yeah.
It's not, it was some guy that was bad that we knew all along. No, it's just this really depressing story addition to some other characters that we knew already. And, it made sense, but man, it's a big downer.
I agree. Yeah. The ending was, man, I hated to see Tim Robbins' character go the way he did. That was it. Just, I mean, it works with that story in a way, but to have him die for unnecessary reasons was just like, I guess it fits with his whole life. That's his whole life has just been a mess, and then for it to end in a way that his friend from childhood ends up, oh, spoiler, his friend from childhood ends up killing him. It was not a fun watch.
Yeah, there's a couple of issues I have with that, especially with Tim Robbins' characters, because on the one hand, oh, this guy's weird because he was sexually abused as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Seems almost too easy and simplistic. I mean, I'm not dismissing that, obviously, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he's fucked up because of this happened to him, which of course you would be, but they don't actually dive into the meaning of that and really develop his character and how that developed over time to bring him to where he is today. It was just like, this happened, therefore 30 years later, this is where we are. Like, there's a whole story there that is just not told.
Yeah.
And so it should be easy to make this kind of trauma emotional and meaningful. Here it is just kind of dumb as a plot point. Like,
yeah.
we need Sean Penn's character to suspect his old childhood friend of killing his daughter. So he's got to be weird. What makes him weird? Oh, it's this.
Yeah, it feels like Eastwood started with this little idea and then kind of worked back from it. And man, yeah, Tim Robbins' character was, much like every other character, was especially depressing. But I'm just sighing and thinking, oh man, I wasn't crazy about any of it. But the fact that he was married and had a kid, like, what happened between that childhood for him to get where he is now? Like, he was able to start a normal relationship and have a child, and but so he must have recovered from what happened in his childhood to some extent, but it's still dominating every aspect of his life for the storytelling, at least.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's why I think the writing really fails is the acting. I mean, Kevin Bacon, Sean Penn, and Tim Robbins are all fantastic actors, and Sean Penn is like going 110% here. And so I get why this was nominated. First of all, it's a Clint Eastwood movie. He's Hollywood royalty, right?
Yes.
He's probably personal friends with half the people that vote for these movies. So, yeah, right? And Sean Penn gives a very powerful, if a little over-the-top performance sometimes. So I get why it was nominated. I just don't think it's actually very good.
Yeah, and my last note I wrote down, I don't know how apropos it is, but it said, I didn't walk away from this movie liking it, but critically thinking it was an somewhat interesting story, and I appreciate it for something else other than being a likable movie. It wasn't really a likable movie, but there was some aspects of it that were interesting, and the acting, especially from Sean Penn, was fairly good. So yeah, I didn't like it, but it was interesting to some extent.
Well, where'd you land on this one?
So I gave this one a B+, just because it's a little higher than, like, remember, I watched this a while ago now. It's been some time, but I thought that it was good enough. It was made to be a dark movie, and it didn't make me happy at all. I didn't particularly like it, but it was something other than a likable movie. I don't know exactly what, but it was something else.
Well, I ended up quite a bit lower than you. This one was a C for me. I just couldn't get over the dialogue and what I felt to be kind of poor writing on this one. So it's a C. Not recommend.
Okay. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it either. I'm just thinking of the tiers for the movies we're looking at this week, and that's kind of where I thought it fit in.
This was not on the bottom of my list.
Me either. In fact,
for sure.
We will get into what was on the bottom.
But another one that wasn't on my bottom is the next one. Lost in Translation, Sofia Coppola's not quite debut, her second feature film starring Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson. If you want to talk about likable movies, I found this one incredibly likable. I've seen it a few times. This is probably the fourth or fifth time I've watched it. And I've watched it that many times because I really enjoy this movie.
I disagree. Okay, so I'll tell you right now, this was at the bottom of my list. This was... I didn't see a story here. It was just like a day in the life of movie. That's how I kind of perceived it. Just... I felt there wasn't any substance. And I know that...
Well, I mean... You're not wrong. There is no story, right? This is one of those like hangout movies. But there's something... Okay, this may be a very personal thing. Obviously, I'm not the only one that likes it. It got nominated, right? It's widely regarded as pretty good. But again, I watched this one for the first time back in 2004, shortly after getting back from my very first solo trip to Japan for work. And there is something that is so accurate to the feeling of being an American in Japan on your own.
I can imagine.
Japan, it's great. I love visiting Japan. I've been 5 or 6 times now, all for work. But it's a very foreign culture. Like if I go to Sweden or Germany or these other places that I've been for work, they use, the same alphabetical characters. I've had enough exposure to Spanish and taking French in high school and other languages that, I can read a word here and there and kind of understand, but you go to Japan and everything is completely different. I've never felt more out of place there, and this movie captures that feeling so perfectly, where you're like, I'm going to go to McDonald's while I'm in Japan because I just need something that grounds me to the place that I'm from and that I understand.
So I have a little more connection. I took Japanese for 3 years, and I understand it very minimally anymore. That was a long time ago. And my daughter is actually teaching herself Japanese right now, just with Duolingo. But I've told her that if she ever becomes fluent in Japanese, we will take the whole family to Japan. So I'm hoping it's not anytime real soon because that's an expensive trip. But my first note I wrote down about this movie sarcastically was, did you know that Japan has different customs than the U.S.? Because to me, and not having been there, I'm sure having been to Japan, this was a very accurate comparison. But for me, not having been there, it's like, yeah, I understand it's going to be different. And it felt kind of like this was a movie made by the Japanese Board of Tourism, because it was kind of just showing off how Japan is and how maybe a couple white people might deal with that. So that was my impression at first thought.
Yeah, I get that. And I've actually read that complaint. I don't know if it's a complaint, but that complaint that this is exotifying Japan and makes it look so foreign. And to me, yeah, sure, it does, right? Japan is foreign.
Yeah.
For somebody that's never gone there before, it is kind of exotic. But what helped me enjoy this movie so much is that it didn't strike me as being the point of the movie. The actual point of the movie was the two characters, Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson's characters, experiencing that foreignness and looking for anything to hold on to that keeps you a little bit connected and makes you feel a little bit more stable. And so I think the Japanese setting is just the way to do that, right? The actual
I get that.
Movie is about these two and their kind of strange, semi-romantic,
kind of
semi-friendship. Yeah, like I don't know. I just thought it worked really well as a setting for those two to have the relationship that they ended up with.
Yeah. And so I want to talk a little bit about Bill Murray, though. Like, so his characters in most of his movies are very deadpan and just kind of sarcastic and funny in most movies. Um, I just felt like he didn't work in this one. There was. I know he doesn't show a lot of emotions in many of his movies, but just felt like he was just an emotionless drone going through this, and I get that was kind of his role as the spokesperson for this Japanese liquor. He was just there doing his job, and he didn't really care that much about it. So it kind of works, but I just didn't feel like there was much to his acting in this one. And Scarlett Johansson, I felt like she was just picked because she was kind of popular at the time, and she was from a different era of movie making than Bill Murray in a way. So I don't know.
Well, get this. Scarlett Johansson was 17 when this movie was filmed. Playing
that's
like
weird.
A 23 or 24-year-old.
Ooh, let's compare that to Gigi.
Let's not bring up...
Okay.
We don't need to talk about Gigi again.
Okay.
But yeah, going the opposite direction, which is weird because I feel like Scarlett Johansson's been playing... She played a woman in her lower to middle 20s for like 15 straight years. From the time she was 17 until the time she was in her early 30s. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about her being 17 when this movie's filmed, given what's like included in the content of the movie.
Yeah,
a little bit. But as long as you don't know that, it works really well, I think.
Okay.
I'm not gonna push back on your criticisms of Bill Murray's acting. Like, I can totally see that. But I just want to mention that my favorite bit in the entire movie is the first time you see him trying to do his Suntory Times commercial, and the director says all this stuff in Japanese. And the translator says, he wants you to say it stronger.
Yeah.
And Bill Murray's like, wait a minute. He said a lot of things. Are you sure? Are you sure that that's all he said? And if you go and read the actual translation of what the director said, it's way more complicated than that. But I just love that bit where Bill Murray's completely baffled about what he's even supposed to be doing, and his translator's not telling him. It's just such a good funny bit.
Yeah, that's a classic joke right there. So another kind of thought I had about this was there was a lot of music interplayed or like in this movie, but I never felt like it played a role. Like we've talked about with Return of the King, the music made that everything more epic. And I felt like with this one, it was more situational and it didn't really add to anything in the movie. And I love when music just takes a scene and makes the scene. And I never felt like the music did that with this one. So
yeah, the needle drops didn't really hit.
Yeah,
I do think I love the karaoke scene.
It was
I love
fun
singing karaoke. We were down in my basement for 6 hours yesterday doing karaoke, so like that's a great scene. But yeah, I think I can't argue with you with that. If you want to see, I just watched on the airplane back from Sweden this movie called Perfect Days. It's a Wim Wenders movie set in Japan that has maybe 4 or 5 70s rock pop song needle drops that are just absolutely perfect. That totally make the movie and make the scene, and that is missing here.
Yeah, it is. All right, I have one more point that I want to bring up before if you want to talk about anything else.
Okay, keep criticizing one of my favorite movies of all time. It's fine.
Okay, how do you feel about Anna Faris in this movie?
Wait, was she the blonde Hollywood starlet?
Yes.
Oh, I think that's a pretty funny bit, but I don't think too much about it.
Okay.
Why do you ask?
No, that was my comment. Is like I'm not sure why she was even in this movie. Her connection to Scarlett Johansson's boyfriend or husband, I guess, who was not really part of the movie. I mean, he was there to kind of set up Scarlett Johansson as being the lonely left in Japan girl, but I didn't feel like Anna Faris's character was even necessary to. It didn't move any scenes forward at all.
I mean, the only thing that worked about it for me is that Bill Murray's character, he's a Hollywood actor, right?
Yeah.
He knows that world of being an actor, and her presence as a thing or person to look down on by Scarlett Johansson's character is kind of a separation between those two. Like, okay. Scarlett Johansson's still young enough and far enough away from the world of Hollywood that she can be like, oh, these dumb Hollywood starlets, aren't they so stupid? And Bill Murray's a little bit more grounded just because he's part of that world. Like, well, no, this is just how it works. So yeah. It's just another example of how they actually don't work well together for each other, those two. Okay. They're from completely different worlds, but because they're stuck in Japan, they feel connected. Gotcha. So I do think the Anna Faris character works out a little bit there. I mean, give or take, right? Like, if she's not in there, it's not much of a different movie, but that's why I didn't mind it.
All right. That was just my last note I had about some of my thoughts, so...
So I'm this is a B+ movie for me. I said one of my favorite movies of all time. That's a bit of an exaggeration. Maybe top 100 if I had to make a list. Okay. But it's a B+. I really enjoy watching this movie.
So we've swapped on these two. Apparently I kind of like darker movies that may not have been real great, but I gave this one a C. So you gave Mystic River the C and I gave it a B+, and now we're just swapping here.
So is this your lowest?
This is my lowest, and I know I mean, there's not much left, so I know what your lowest is now.
I think it's the next one we're going to talk about, right?
It better be, because if it's the other one that we're going to talk about, I'd probably just hang up on this call right now.
No. It's Seabiscuit.
Yeah, then that's very fair, because I'm not too far off on that one. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, it's another one. So actually, all of these are rewatches for me, all 5 of these, because you could get DVDs from Blockbuster in 2003 and just watch them all at home, which is what I did. I had almost no memories of Seabiscuit, though, and that's probably good. I'm trying to block it from my memory now after rewatching it.
It's not surprising you have no memories, or it's not very memorable.
Yeah, so Seabiscuit was directed by Gary Ross, stars Tobey Maguire, Jeff Bridges, and Chris Cooper, as well as a whole host of other people in supporting roles. But, man, it's so jarringly sappy.
Yeah.
And full of, like, the fuzziest sepia-tone nostalgia you could possibly imagine. And that just did not land for me. Like, I like nostalgia. If you want to show me like a movie about the 1969 Mets coming from nowhere to win the World Series, yeah, great, that's awesome. But this, I couldn't deal with it.
Yeah. Okay, so my first comment here was, this was a fun, quote, I put fun in quotation marks. This was a fun movie that told a story that didn't need to be told. I mean, nobody was looking for this. This is something that I was like, oh, we need a story about a horse. No, after I watched this, I went up to my wife and I said, we already have Mr. Ed. Why do we need another horse story? Okay, not quite completely accurate, but
oh boy,
I feel like in our time, people look back at the 30s when this story took place as kind of this just silly little time between world wars, essentially, that nothing, it was just a jovial time. People, it might have been hard at times for people, but it was just kind of a goofy era, and this movie plays into that, I think, with especially, oh god, I hated the announcer. That ruined the movie for me so much. Like, so many times when it comes on, does his slide whistle, hits his gong, and banging on things and announcing things. It's just like, I hope that's not how it was, but it might have been.
I love William H. Macy.
Me too.
He's so good in so many things, but yeah, every time he was on the screen, it was just, come on, we don't need this. There's one movie that I just saw relatively recently that this one really reminded me of. It was called The Boys in the Boat. Did you watch that one?
I have
Or have you
not.
read the book?
No.
It's another come from behind underdog sports movie set in the 30s that's incredibly sappy and nostalgia based and covering the depression with a very, very light hand. Like, oh yeah, it's pretty hard, and then everybody kind of turns out okay.
Mm-hmm.
And these two movies are like peas in a pod for me. I don't like either of them.
Okay.
Which is terrible because Boys in the Boat is about the University of Washington crew team that went to Germany to win the gold medal in the Olympics. I went to the University of Washington.
You have that connection.
This should be near and dear to my heart. Like, you see their boat on campus. Like, it's this big thing. And the movie just stunk.
Oh,
the
man.
book, fantastic. Go read the book. The book is great. The movie reminded me of Seabiscuit.
And I would love to see, not that I want to see a remake of this movie, but I would love to see this done in a much grittier way that really showed how hard things were in the 1930s. It would be an interesting story to see this horse who everybody just wrote off as useless, I'm sure they put in so much time and effort to get him where he was to be one of the best horses ever, although he never won a Triple Crown race. But it would have been an interesting story to see just how much of a struggle it actually was. I guess to an extent they showed that in this movie, but it was so washed over and sappy and just supposed to be fun movie that it took the fun out of it. It made it less interesting.
Yeah, the other big thing that didn't work for me was Tobey Maguire.
Oh, really?
So he was, I guess, a hot property at the time in Hollywood, coming off of his Spider-Man movies, and I feel like he played his character like he was in a Spider-Man movie. Kind of snide and aloof. He felt completely separate from where he was. He gets the crap kicked out of him in a boxing match that he's trying to do to make money, right? But it doesn't seem to mean anything. Like, nothing means anything. He's always just this kind of sarcastically mad at the world, but still kind of just joking character. I don't know. The performance just didn't make sense and didn't land for me.
Okay, yeah. Well, it did end up meaning something because he was blind in one eye from that incident. But
oh, right, yeah. Like, plot-wise, it meant something.
But even that was such a minimal plot point that it didn't really matter. Excuse me. Another thing I struggled with was Jeff Bridges coming on and not instantly seeing him as the dude. And not like when I hear his voice, that's all that comes to mind.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, obviously, this is not that character whatsoever, but that's who he is to me.
Funny story about Jeff Bridges before we get to our grades. Earlier today, actually, I was, browsing for a movie to watch, and so I pulled up an old 1971 movie called The Last Picture Show.
Okay.
Never seen it. It's got a really young Jeff Bridges.
Oh, really?
And he's got that same voice. And I was like, oh, my God. I have to focus to not see him as Jeffrey Lebowski.
Absolutely.
I mean, he was maybe like 22 when this movie was made. He's playing a high schooler, but still, he's got that voice. He's got the Jeff Bridges voice. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it's funny how certain roles completely define an actor. And that, for me, he is the Big Lebowski. Yeah. So, okay, I gave Seabiscuit a B-. It wasn't quite as bad for me as Lost in Translation. It wasn't good either.
Yeah. So this one was my lowest. It came in at a C-.
Okay.
I just could not get over the sappiness.
Yeah, the sappiness just sapped the energy out of it.
Good one.
Yeah, thanks. I wouldn't agree with you on that one.
But our last movie, Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World. Holy cow. again, a rewatch. But had it not been for Return of the King,
Oh,
this is an Oscar winner.
this is run away with a competition Oscar winner over at least these other nominations.
Oh yeah, if it hadn't run into the juggernaut of Lord of the Rings, like this is a shoo-in. This is directed by Peter Weir, starring Russell Crowe, Paul Bettany, and a bunch of others. This is our second Peter Weir that we've talked about.
Wait, which other one?
He also directed Dead Poets Society, another Oscar nominee from 1989.
That's right. You mentioned it on that episode, and we thought we're going to talk about him again before too long. You said so. Yeah, here we are.
And I feel like all of my complaints about Dead Poets Society have been improved upon and fixed 100-fold in this movie.
He just needed 14 years.
Yeah, 14 more.
Yeah. So I remember when this one came out, and I remember thinking, oh, they're trying to make a Russell Crowe into this epic action star in just a different scene, a different scenario. And so I didn't go see it when it first came out. In fact, this was my first watch of this one. And I had written it off just because I loved Gladiator so much that I didn't want to ruin it with something that I thought might be not as good. And now there's a second Gladiator movie. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But so I purposely did not watch this movie when it came out. Man, I've made some bad choices for what movies to watch and other ones to not watch. This falls in the category of, why didn't I watch this one a long time ago? Because this is an amazing movie.
Well, let's talk about your reason for not watching it, right? You didn't want to see Russell Crowe just, here's another action movie. And that is really what worked so well for me for this movie, is that it is exciting. It's thrilling. The naval battles are incredibly well shot and exciting. But there's so much more to all of the characters. Russell Crowe's character, Paul Bettany's doctor, each of the seamen and the ship hands and the lieutenants and everything. Everybody gets to be both badass, but also an actual real person.
Yeah, very
so
human.
Russell Crowe, yeah, he's this incredible captain, but he's also giving the opportunity to have these weaknesses and to need help from other people. The doctor is, at first I was a little bit worried because he's just this wimpy doctor and everybody's like, oh, you don't even know how to shoot a gun. But then when the the rubber meets the road, he's out there like pulling a bullet out of his own body, like being a real badass. So everybody, all the characters just get an opportunity to shine. And Peter Weir and the actors just really nail that humanity of everybody, which is, I think, what was missing from Dead Poets Society. They got to be emotional, but they didn't get to be heroic. And here, everybody gets the opportunity to do both.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things was the relationship between the captain and the doctor. Like, just how intertwined everything they did was. And yet they both did everything that was expected of them, and were still able to maintain this normal relationship, like accommodating and adjusting and being able to give and take, because that's really what their relationship came down to, was like, hey, can we do this? No, because I'm the captain, we can't do that. But it ends up happening anyway. Like, oh, well, we had to stop anyway, so we might as well stop on the Galapagos and let you explore a little bit. So just like things like that. There are so many good relationships where, like, hey, we're both doing everything we have to do, but we're going to try to accommodate each other as well. And it was just a fun thing to watch.
I also love the ending where they're talking about the ship's doctor, the other ship's doctor. What was the name of the other ship?
Acheon.
Acheon,
Archeon, or something like that.
Yeah, or something like that. And they're like, well, no, the captain's log says the ship's doctor died a couple of weeks ago. It's realizing, oh no, that guy was the captain. And so sets it up perfectly for another movie, which I'm kind of glad they didn't do, because this one is so top notch that I feel like any sequel would have been a letdown.
Yeah. And one thing that struck me was the age of some of the kids. Like,
oh yeah,
my thought was, well, why are they having these kids act out these parts? And then I thought, oh, because that's actually how it was. They had on these boats, I'm sure they had 10 to 14-year-olds that were in roles that you couldn't even imagine them doing nowadays. But
yeah,
it just struck me, like, it took me a moment, like, what, kids, get out of here. And then I was like, oh, I get it. And it kind of sunk in, like, oh, this was what, the 17...
the first decade of the 19th century, like 1803,
Okay.
1804.
Yeah. And man, I can't even imagine what life would have been like back then.
And even those kids get the opportunity to be kids, but also to be heroes.
Absolutely. Like the boy who had to have his arm wait, it was his arm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought he played his role amazingly. And it was crazy to see also the tiers of characters, or like the people on the boat. Like, these kids were essentially crewmates, whereas like some of the older men were just ship hands that were cleaning and doing all the menial labor. And I thought, okay, that's how it was, because you were born into that. Your family was the boat owner or whatever it was. You were born into essentially royalty, and these other people were born into squalor, and it played out on the boats as well.
So have you read the book? Are you familiar with the source material?
No, I have not read the book.
Same. How familiar are you with early 19th century naval warfare tactics?
They shot cannons at each other? I don't know.
Yeah, same. But I feel like the people that made this movie knew.
Absolutely.
You never get the feeling that they are guessing about, I don't know, maybe what it was like. You feel like you're actually watching what really happened. And just another thing that I really enjoyed about it. What it blows my mind is this is, 200 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And the difference, like, if the wind stops, we don't care.
Yeah.
We've got our nuclear powered aircraft carrier that's going to keep going much faster than this thing could ever go, no matter what the weather is.
Yeah.
And so just the technological change and what these people had to go through for something that's so simple for us now. I was especially thinking about that when I flew to Sweden, right?
Yeah.
200 years ago, that's like a months long journey.
You don't go there for business?
Yeah, fraught with peril.
Yeah.
You might get attacked by, the French. You might just get caught in a storm and sink. I just sit on a plane for a few hours and then I'm there.
And go ahead.
Just the rate of change in the last 200 years is insane. And we'll get to this when we talk about the book, but the rate of change in even just the last 80 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty epic.
A gnat just flew into my throat.
Oh, no.
So I apologize for the loud coughs. A little extra protein for me this evening. Woo.
So one of my thoughts about this, like how fraught with peril everything was, it really makes you realize how aggressive colonizing was. Like, to have to travel over these oceans and go around these points where your boat could be wiped out in a matter of seconds to claim new lands. I mean, it took a lot of aggression and a lot of desire for expansion to colonize new areas, the new world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this was amazing. I loved this movie. It was more than I expected it to be.
Didn't you say on a past episode that you have a friend for whom this is their favorite movie?
This is in their top, I think he said top 3 or top 5 of all time. Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
I do too now. And yeah, I wouldn't argue with him at all because this is a really good movie.
Yeah, so this one is also an A for me. Lord of the Rings was slightly higher. I think on my notes I gave Lord of the Rings Return of the King a 9.7 out of 10, and this is a 9.5. But the fact that 2003 had 2, for me, A movies nominated is awesome.
And Billy Boyd was in both of them. I gave this one, wasn't he?
Wait, he was?
Yeah, he was one of the
Oh, that's a good year.
Yeah, well, I mean, with Return of the King being filmed previously, and this one being done with all the other Lord of the Rings movies, I'm sure there wasn't a conflict of scheduling or anything there. But
okay, good point.
But yeah, so using both of them, just because I wasn't rating this on a out of 10 scale or anything like that. I couldn't put this above Return of the King. I did give it an A- just because if I give it an A, then it's like, well, those two are the same then. So I had to drop it down. I mean, it's an A, but for the sake of this comparing these movies, I had to give it a minus just to have some distinction between the two.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so for me, 2003, from top to bottom of the nominees is Lord of the Rings, Master and Commander, Lost in Translation, Mystic River, and then in the basement is Seabiscuit.
The base. So yeah, not too far off. I had Return of the King, then Master and Commander. So we're agreed at the top, and then I believe I had Mystic River, and then Seabiscuit and Lost in Translation at the bottom of mine because I just couldn't get into Lost in Translation. So at least we're agreeing at the top.
Yeah, I'd say if you get 2 or 3 of the nominees that you really like, that's a pretty good year.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I can't wait for more years where we have it's a hard time deciding what actually should have won. I felt like 1956 was a little bit like that, or 58, sorry. But
I think they got it right with this one.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it just deserved it so much more. Well, with the whole trilogy, I mean, that's just it's hard to look at it separately, and it got what it deserved.
I will say that when it comes to the National Book Award winner for fiction, which we're going to talk about right now, I don't know that they got it right. I don't know how many books I've read from 2003, but it can't have been this one. It can't.
Okay, let me preface this by saying this is the first book I did not get through. I got into it, and obviously we had lots of time between our last 2 episodes, but I just couldn't bring myself to keep reading what I felt was pretentious and written in a way that almost seemed, I don't want to say academic necessarily, but it was just written in a way that didn't keep me interested whatsoever.
Well, let's put a pin in that and come back to it in a moment. And I did finish the book, which is why I'm making Zach talk about it today, because if I made it all the way to the end, when I checked it out, I was like, 270 pages? No problem. It was a chore, but I did it. I got to the bitter end, and so we're definitely going to talk about it. But for Zach's sake, and for all of yours sake, I'll give you a quick rundown of the plot. Zach complained about Lost in Translation not having a plot, and that's kind of the same thing here. It's a story of a former British soldier who is traveling around Asia. He has gone on a long trek in China and is writing a book about it. He goes to an island off of Japan, meets a young woman who's taking care of her older brother who's got a weird disease. They kind of fall for each other. There's another guy who is also there. It's an old war buddy. He does some things. There's a few other characters that do some things. They travel back and forth to England once. They go to China. They go to Japan. But essentially, for a book called The Great Fire, there isn't really much of a flame at all.
Ooh, I like that. Well, I don't like that there's no flame, but I like that analogy.
The plot doesn't really go anywhere, so it's a very character-driven book. But I think I'm going to kind of agree with Zach where it does come off as academic. And I hate to use the word pretentious because I like a little pretension. Right?
Yeah, for sure. It's okay.
If you look at the books on my damn bookshelf, I clearly like a little bit of pretension. But this was just over the top. And so we should clarify. We're talking about The Great Fire by Shirley Hazard.
Yes.
Which on a sentence by sentence basis, I can see this being an award winner. She crafts a good sentence.
Even if they might be a little long at times.
Here's what I ran into with this book. This weird dichotomy of the sentences. Some of them were very long, but also the entire book felt edited down to the bone. You know that you watch The Office, right?
Of course.
You remember that episode where oh no, who's the guy that makes the chili?
Kevin.
Why can't I remember his Kevin? Where Kevin says, "Why use many word when few word do trick?"
Yeah.
That's what this book felt like. Not to the point where it was ungrammatical, but any word that wasn't strictly necessary was cut from it.
But there was still too many words.
Right. So all the filler words that make things flow that aren't strictly necessary to convey meaning, but help with understanding, were gone.
I see. So the fun words were gone.
Right.
So we took all the fun out of it and we're left with just the details. And one of the few comments I actually made about this as I read the first several chapters was there's too many commas, which I felt like there was these huge run-on sentences where literally nothing happened. There was nothing there, but it took up like a paragraph worth of space in the book. And so I felt like, I just can't keep reading this in a way that isn't interesting and it is challenging to read at the same time.
Yeah. So one piece that I've left out of the plot description. So you remember the two main characters. It's been so long I don't even remember their names. The army guy,
yeah,
and the young woman. They do end up getting together at the end.
Okay.
In New Zealand. I feel like we can't get away from award-winning or nominated things that involve an older man falling for a 17-year-old girl. Like, is this just something that people really love?
This is in every aspect of all entertainment. Yikes, especially with some of the things going on in the world today.
I mean, at least this book hits it head on. I don't know if you got that far, but they address the fact that this is not appropriate. This is not how things are supposed to go, but it's how things are for them. Like, they do feel these things for each other. They can't do anything because she's too young. So at least this book actually grabs onto the meat of it, right? And
that's fair.
Doesn't dismiss it. Yeah. So it comes across not nearly as creepy as, say, like Gigi. Or
I don't think anything will ever come off as that creepy again.
Or even Lost in Translation once you know how old Scarlett Johansson was when it was filmed. So from that perspective, it's at least better. But yeah, it was a struggle. And the other, I talked about. Sorry, I'm yakking here, but you didn't even finish the book. So
yeah, I'm just sitting back and relaxed right now.
The other thing that struck me about the actual writing. So first, all the fun words, all the flowing words are cut, but they are from all the they are from the dialogue too. So, sure, if you've got naturalistic sounding dialogue and this really sparse, obtuse, dense narration or description, okay, fine, I can deal with that. But all the characters talk like that too. So there's no escape. Plus, you also can't really tell who's saying what without explicitly knowing. Because their tone, the words they use, the flow of all their things that they're saying are indistinguishable.
No one is unique in this book.
Yeah, it feels just monolithically dense.
Okay.
So this girl's like 17, right? When you start.
Yeah.
I know 17-year-olds. Even the most intelligent ones are, I mean, they have energy, not like us old men, right? Not like us old people. And that's just completely absent in the book. It's so formally rigid that it really was a struggle.
Yeah.
To get through those 270 pages.
I think I only got through 75 pages. I like to give everything, and especially doing the podcast, I like to give things a chance. And I mean, movies are easy. Even if it's bad, I'll watch it all the way through just because you got to experience how bad it actually is. But just the time that it took and how little I was enjoying this one, I feel bad, but not that bad, especially hearing your review of it.
Yeah. I mean, when you have limited time on this earth, don't hate read anything.
Yes. You can hate watch because that's only an hour or two here, but...
Right. I mean, not to say that I hated this book. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I don't think I even liked it. But I didn't hate it.
Have you read a book you have hated?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I read one that I hated, and that was... Before reading that one, my opinion was always... If you start reading a book, you gotta see it through to the bitter end. And then I got to the end of that one, and I'm decided I'm never doing that again. If I hate it, nope, it's going back to the library, back on the shelf, into the trash, whatever.
Yeah.
So this is the first award winner of anything, like movies, music, books, where I've thought, I'm not 100% sure the people that gave this book an award actually read it.
It could very well be the case.
I mean, Shirley Hazard had written a book about 40 years previously, 30 years previously, called The Transit of Venus, which was apparently really good.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, I haven't read that one either. So I think there's some aspect of, oh my gosh, she's written another one. It's got to be so good.
Could be.
And then you read it and you think, oh, well, there must be something I'm missing because she's a good writer. So it's good. I'm going to vote for it. Because there's no way I can believe that of all the books that were published in 2003, this was the best fiction book.
It seems hard to believe that considering how many books are pushed out every year and how many good writers publish a book every year and good books are out there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying give the Da Vinci Code. This is better than the Da Vinci Code. Less readable, but certainly better.
Okay.
But, yeah, I can't recommend it unless maybe you've read her other books or some of her nonfiction that she's read and you really love it. This was just, it was not for me.
And clearly was not for me either. Gave up on it. But if you had
so I don't know what that means for a grade for you. If that's just
I think
like
it's an NA.
incomplete
NA for me.
I'd say this is around a C for me.
Okay.
There are certain images in it that are just really well done.
Okay.
Like describing, the sun setting over the Pacific, just really small bits that are profound, almost.
Gotcha.
But not worth the digging to get to them.
Okay. So,
but it did, like Master and Commander, make me think of how small the world has gotten. This takes place in the post-World War II era. Airplanes exist, right?
mm-hmm.
But it still takes the guy like 6 days to get from England to New Zealand.
Okay.
You fly to Italy, and then from Italy you go to North Africa, and then to India, and then you're in Japan, and then you gotta. And I'm like, I actually looked it up. It's like, if I bought a ticket right now, I finished the book, I don't know, maybe like 7 p.m. If I bought a ticket right now for tomorrow morning, I could be in New Zealand within 24 hours. I could.
Things are pretty convenient nowadays.
Right. And so that is kind of a big theme in this book, is how far apart people get.
Okay.
He's leaving Japan and going to China, and maybe they'll never see each other again. And how much that's not true now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, especially the main character's pretty wealthy, so he can buy the best transportation option you can get, and it still takes days.
Yeah.
Weeks to get from New Zealand to North America if you're sailing, right? Or not sailing, if they had powered boats, and just how much smaller and how unimportant those distances are now.
Yeah. It's so convenient we don't even consider it it's still a hassle to some extent. Like, I don't want to get on a plane and fly for 16 hours to go to Japan.
Right.
Oh, wait. Let's consider the previous year's options of getting there 6 days later.
Yeah, and we talk about, it is expensive.
It is.
To fly to New Zealand. I think the ticket was somewhere around $1,600. But in 1947, the ticket was infinitely priced because it was impossible to get to New Zealand within 24 hours. There is no amount of money you could have spent to do it.
Yep.
So the sheer luxury that we have at our fingertips nowadays is incredible.
Someday we'll look back on this and say, it took you 24 hours to get to New Zealand. I teleported there in 2 minutes. Maybe.
I hope that doesn't happen.
Not in our lifetime.
I work for a company that manufactures automobiles. We're screwed if that happens.
Yeah, you're done. All right.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't finish this book, and hopefully the future award winners are better and the bestsellers. I will admit that I've started reading the bestseller for our next year.
I have as well.
I'm not sure I'm going to finish.
I might be the one talking about it.
we can get to that later because we still have some music to talk about.
Yes, we do. And that's something and in particular, my wife has always been a huge fan of Outkast. And so we get to talk about the essentially double album of Speaker Box and The Love Below, which were the award winners for 2003. Essentially, like I said, a double album where each of the main talents in Outkast kind of put together their own album. And oh boy, do they have different feels. I think that's one way to say it.
You got that right.
Yeah, so I kind of want to talk about these as separate albums. They're not. They were released as one album, but it's like 37 tracks for one album.
Okay, part 1 and part 2. Speaker Box, The Love Below.
Okay. You do have to consider that, it is one album, but it's two very different ideas.
Right. The Grammys only give one award for Best Album, and this is the one that got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
2. However you want to call it, the Grammys consider it a single album.
Yeah. And so that's why we're looking at both of them, or this one. So Speaker Box was Big Boy's album, I believe, and Love Below was Andre 3000's album, or they kind of took the lead on each of them. Obviously, they're working together on both of them, and they're all in the tracks together. But Speaker Box to me was a party. It was that the music for me in college, where you just throw that on if you were, not that I went to too many house parties in college, that really wasn't my thing, but I remember going to a couple, and this is the thing that you put on as people are sitting around drinking and just having a good time. And speaker box, to me, man, it's a party to listen to.
Yeah, so I didn't listen to this when it was new in 2003. Any of it. Well, that's not true. Of course, everybody heard Hey Ya on the radio, right? Well, I loved Speaker Box. It's just like banger after banger. And several of the tracks feature Killer Mike.
Yes.
Who I think is probably my favorite rapper.
That's fair.
He's got a group. I mean, his solo stuff is great. Like I think he won the Grammy last year.
Oh, did he? I don't know.
For his most recent solo album, but his work with LP in Run the Jewels is probably my favorite hip hop. They're fantastic. I saw them opening for Rage Against the Machine last summer.
Nice.
Incredible show. They like burned the place down. So good. And so every time Killer Mike came on one of the tracks on Speaker Box, I was like, crank this puppy up. We're rocking this one.
Yeah, and there was so many good tracks throughout this one. I personally, my favorite one was Ghetto Music. Just the lyrical, masterful lyrics. And just the way they go through the lyrics in this song is just. I put that one on repeat for like a couple days. Not just like constantly,
Nice.
But I would listen to that one. It's just so good. And I mean, obviously there's other great ones on here as well. That one's just kind of encapsulates Outkast as a whole. Just kind of their goofiness as a unit and their skill as rappers. I felt like that song just really, really told the story of Outkast.
Yeah, that is one of my favorites as well, even though it doesn't feature Killer Mike.
No, it doesn't, sadly.
Yeah, but I like that there's basically no filler on Speaker Box. There's no, they don't slow it down for a little groove here, to sort of even things out. No, it's just like thumper after thumper, and
yeah.
You're right when you say that it's party music. I didn't go to any house parties in 2003 because I had a little freaking baby working my first job, working for the man, not in college. So that didn't happen. But yeah,
that's what it was.
If I talk to my younger siblings like you or my wife's younger siblings, that's what they were listening to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not that much younger than you, but I was still in college at that point.
Right. And that's a pretty big shift. When you go from going to school all the time to having to go to work all the time.
Yeah, it's a big life change. And then throw in a kid in there for you.
Yeah. I mean, when they start paying you money instead of you paying them money, that's a pretty nice change.
Yeah, it is. But it requires a different lifestyle.
Yeah, they expect you to do things.
Oh, man.
Like, to earn the money. Ugh. I'd rather just sit at home listening to Outkast.
Yeah. Wouldn't we all? Yeah, so Speaker Box was just so much fun. A couple other songs that I really liked. And I'm sure another one that almost everybody heard back then was The Way You Move. It's another classic. It's that and Hey Ya were probably the two biggest songs on the album. And the other one I wanted to mention was Church, I believe. It's just called Church.
Oh, yeah. That was probably my favorite one.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, those three were the ones that kind of just stuck out to me as being like, okay, this is classic Outkast, so good. And yeah, on Church, it was like the reverb effect of the music kind of bouncing around, and I just loved that. So
I love the line that was like, what about repentance? What about doing the same sin over and again and again and again? Like, I can't do the rhythm because I'm not a rapper, right? But just the syncopation of the hitting those words and the little goofy voice, like, what about this? And such a good. That was my favorite song.
Yeah, and as I was listening to it, it struck me the difference between the synchronization of the music and the lyrics compared to the 50 Cent album, where the music was just a background track and he was rapping on top of this. The music and lyrics in Speakerbox were one thing. It was just a unit that worked perfectly together, I thought.
Yeah, and sure, there are lyrical, thematic contents in Speakerbox and The Love Below that are unsavory from time to time, I guess you could say. Like, maybe not to the degree that 50 Cent, but there's a purpose behind it. Like, thematically, it means something other than just, I'm a badass gangsta.
Yeah.
like when it came to 50 Cent. So technically, I guess the 50 Cent album, I don't even remember what it was called. Get Rich or Die Trying?
That's the one.
Like, technically, that's the same genre as this Outkast album, but...
Feels weird to say that.
They're so... Like, the level of quality and the musical talent or excitement that's in there is just miles different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, do we want to give Speakerbox a separate rating from The Love Below, or how are you thinking that?
Sure.
Okay. I went ahead and did that, and then I kind of gave a whole album grade as well. I gave Speakerbox an A-. It's a lot of fun to listen to. It's one of the better rap albums, in my opinion, that's out there.
I'm ringing the bell of agreement. I'm at an A- too.
Perfect. I like that. Now, my question before we start on Love Below is, do you remember when the Beatles started doing drugs? Oh, wait, that was probably the whole time. But when they started making experimental music and kind of weird...
It was a little bit before my time.
Oh, okay.
I know enough about the history of the Beatles.
So
to know.
The reason I bring that up is because that's what The Love Below felt like to me. This was experimenting with music and sound, and some of the different ways you can implement it into an album, and some of it worked to an extent, but a lot of it was just like, oh, that's a sound you can make. Not necessarily one I'd want you to make, but that is a sound you can make. So very different than Speakerbox, for sure.
Oh yeah. Completely different, and I totally hear what you're saying about the experimentalness, and I think Andre 3000's just gone even farther down that experimental path.
You told me he recently released a jazz flute album, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to describe it as jazz flute.
Oh,
it's a flute album with some jazz there. It's a strange one.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out.
He also has had some pretty great acting roles.
Yeah, that's
recently.
True. He has.
He played this awesome, weird pottery guy in a movie called Showing Up that came out last year that basically nobody saw. It was a great movie. I loved it. Again, a movie where nothing happens. But this is a complete aside, but I saw it in a packed house.
I thought you said nobody saw it.
Opening night in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's surprising.
Nobody saw it anywhere else, but it just really drove home how weird of a movie town Los Angeles is. Since everybody works in the movies there, they're like, oh yeah, it's the new Kelly Reichardt movie. We're all going. And you go to any other market and it's like it played here for a week, I think, and nobody went to see it. But it was such a surreal experience to see this tiny little movie that, you know, it's not going to be popular.
Yeah.
But it was like a completely sold out.
Interesting.
Theater. Anyway, Andre 3000's in that. Great.
Yeah.
But
he also did The Love Below. So
yes.
The thing that I really did like about The Love Below was the story. This whole album was essentially an interconnected story that was done through music. And I really appreciate that thread all the way through, and how it talks about these characters go from meeting to falling in love to falling out, and just everything about that worked for me, even if the songs didn't always work. So that was the thread I found that was really good about it.
Yeah, that was really eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I frankly never listened to this before. But I heard Hey Ya 1,000 times. Every time there's a karaoke party, Hey Ya comes on, make sure to play it so that people can sing it.
Yeah.
And it's always struck me, because it's an amazing pop song.
Oh, it really is.
And lyrically, it's always struck me a little weird, like the contents of it about love and your parents, and
Yeah.
what's cooler than cool, ice cold, and like playing aloof, and like this is not your typical pop music lyric stuff. So what's the deal here? And now I get it.
Yeah.
This is in the middle of that story of a relationship. And so now, given that context, obviously, Hey Ya is still an amazing banger, but it makes sense.
It really does. And yeah, and just that story, it's not like a special story or anything. It's a typical guy meets girl, they fall in love, they have their problems and whatnot, but just the way it's told and all the so many different sounds and so many different styles of music, it's interesting to see that all through it's the same thing. It's the same story all throughout, and that's what for me really did work here. Yeah. So yeah, for me though, Hey Ya was probably the best track on here. I mean, it's so recognizable. It was everywhere back then, and it's everybody could sing along. That made it a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. It's a bit jarring when you listen to this to go from the speaker box section to the love below. I do try or wish they were separate, frankly.
Yeah.
Because coming into the love below, which is frankly a pretty incredible album experience, right?
It is, for sure.
The concept album and the experimental music, but coming off of the back of an incredible party rock or party rap anthem one after another, the shift is just too jarring.
Yeah, I agree. And to have Norah Jones on a couple of these tracks.
do you remember how big Norah Jones was in 2003?
Yes, I do, but it didn't seem to make sense. I mean, she does good. It's good on those tracks, but I don't put Outkast and Norah Jones together in my mind. And even when I listen to the songs, it's like, okay, that's Norah Jones, but it just doesn't really work as well as like Killer Mike does.
Yeah, I mean, Andre 3000, he was just trying stuff, and
yeah, I appreciate
a lot of
that,
it.
Though.
A lot of it works.
Yeah, some of it doesn't. Although this album might have one of my favorite titles for a track, Dracula's Wedding. Like, all I wrote down was, what the hell? I love it.
Sounds like a 1937 Universal Pictures monster movie.
Exactly.
Bride of Frankenstein, double feature with Dracula's Wedding.
Yeah, but that track in itself was actually pretty good, I felt like, but the name of it was kind of goofy, but yeah. So this was, I like a lot of the unique sounds on this one. I don't like some of the unique sounds on this one. There's just so much variety and so much difference from track to track. It's hard to have at least we have that story thread, because the music doesn't really connect to each other at all, I felt like.
Right. Honestly, some of the tracks on here give me the same feeling as The Great Fire.
Oh no.
There are pieces individually that work, but it gets too intellectual or too out there and obtuse
I see that.
You almost feel like Andre 3000 made this album or some of this tracks for him and only him.
And I think that's absolutely true.
Like no one else in the world will get all of what it is that he's doing there. And so
yeah,
you feel like you're missing something, but frankly, it's just sure, maybe I'm missing something. I just don't enjoy it all that much.
Yeah, and there's plenty of songs where it's just like, okay, just be Andre 3000. That's all this is. And
yeah,
it was fun, but yeah, I agree with you that this should have been 2 separate albums because they were nothing alike.
The concern there is that Speakerbox sells 8 million and The Love Below sells 8. No, I mean, any album that has Hey Ya on it is going to be a hit.
Yeah, I think there's enough there to make some sales, but still, Speakerbox would have been better.
I think we talked about this with 50 Cent, that any album that produces even one song that enters the greater cultural consciousness where it's still like completely recognizable more than 20 years later, that's a good album.
Yeah.
Even if the rest is trash.
Yep. Bunch of experimental string instrument songs, whatever. Doesn't matter as long as it's got Hey Ya.
Yeah. Which fortunately it's not all that. There are some good ones.
Yeah.
Here. Yeah. And so that's why I think for this one, for The Love Below, I end up high B, low B plus. I think I'm going to call it a high B.
We have to ring the bell again because I put it down as a B as well and was bordering on B plus as well.
Oh man, we're right on top of each other here.
Yeah,
that sounded weird. That's a weird way to say that.
But Outkast creates a lot of weird scenarios. I think that's just what they do as a musical group. But yeah.
So for the combined album, if I take the B, high B, and an A minus, I think this lands at an extremely high B plus. We're talking like an 89%.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Yeah, I mean,
this is an album that's worth revisiting in perpetuity.
Yeah, and it's not one of the greatest albums ever, just because. I mean, if it was just Speakerbox, if Hey Ya somehow made its way and made sense on the Speakerbox side of things, this would be one of the most epic albums ever. But together, yeah, it's worth revisiting, but it's not one of the greatest albums of all time, I don't think.
Now, one thing I failed to do was look up what else was nominated in 2003. Did you?
Oh, I think I did at one point, but that was so long ago, I can't remember now.
Right, like I wonder what else was nominated. Is this the best one? Should this have won?
I don't know.
Well, while we are chatting, I'm gonna actually look that up.
Okay.
If we can.
Yeah. I mean, there had to be some other good music, I would think, because I mean, 2003. I can't even think what else was popular at the time.
Well, this I just pulled up the list. This looks like it was probably the best one. Okay. Well, okay. There was Speakerbox and The Love Below. Justified, that's Justin Timberlake and Timbaland.
Mm-hmm.
Fallen, the Evanescence album.
Okay.
Under Construction by Missy Elliott, which I can't speak for because I haven't listened to it. And Elephant, the White Stripes album, which is absolutely killer. So
more so than this album?
I don't know. Okay. That's a toss-up.
Okay.
But again, a year with 2 albums of that caliber is a good year.
So what we're saying here is that 2003 was a pretty good year for entertainment.
That's how I remember it, actually.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. And even if you didn't like it, the Da Vinci Code was entertaining. Okay, maybe not.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It kept people engaged at least. So, yeah.
Yeah, so just so you know, that White Stripes album, Elephant, is the one with Seven Nation Army on it.
Oh, okay.
There you go. So both of these albums, the Outkast album and the White Stripes album, have songs that will be remembered forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that you can...
And so, like...
I still hear Seven Nation Army from time to time, just randomly, like on the radio or something. So,
Oh, I have to tell you a story. So I forgot everything that happened since we last recorded.
okay.
But at the very end of August, I got to see Jack White perform in the 930 Club in Washington, D.C., which is a small club, like maybe 1,100 people.
Okay. Nice.
So, normally Jack White plays much bigger
Yeah.
shows, but he was doing this series of small venue shows, and I logged on right at 10 a.m., got put in the queue, and got a chance to buy tickets. I'm not going to tell you how much I paid for these tickets.
Not necessary.
Because it's a little bit ridiculous, but went to that show, and it was incredible. And he closed the main part of the show with Seven Nation Army. It was just one of the greatest concert experiences of my life.
I bet.
Because this guy, he's been playing for 30 years, so he knows what he's doing.
Oh, of course, yeah.
It just absolutely brought down the house that was full of middle-aged people like me.
Yeah, you were the target audience there.
On a weeknight. It was on a Tuesday, and I think it took until Friday before I recovered. I'm like, I was out until midnight. But it was absolutely worth it. Like, I wouldn't have traded that for anything.
Yeah. That would be... Man, I don't get to many concerts. I think one of the last concerts I actually went to was... this is going to sound weird, was 311.
No way.
Yes. So, and
the
that
guys
was...
to sing Down?
I can't even remember. This was many years ago, like before we had kids even. And so it's been a while. But
oh, yeah, a while.
Yeah, so I don't go. I mean, I could probably find some nearby, but just never gone to many. So, yeah.
Yeah, I actually went to 2 concerts that week. I went to Jack White on Tuesday, recovered by Friday, and then Saturday night I took my daughter and some of her friends to see Mitski.
I don't even know who Mitski is.
Very popular in the 15 to 25 demographic.
That's probably why I don't know who he is. Or
yeah,
she.
And she.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a Japanese American singer songwriter kind of thing. Which was great because the crowd was like 95% people that age, and then 5% of us parents.
Just standing back watching, like, I don't know what's going on.
Yep, the chaperones.
There's a great King of the Hill episode that plays on that, and I won't get into King of the Hill too much because that's like one of my all-time favorite shows, but Hank Hill takes his son Bobby to a concert that he thinks is going to be a clean kids concert, and Bobby starts...
And it's 50 Cent?
No, it's a boy band. He thinks they're just like a classic musical group, and it turns out to be like a boy band. They like start stripping their clothes off, and Bobby's freak dancing with the girl that he went to the concert with, and Hank pulls him out of the concert early and gets really angry at him. But
that sounds like a good one.
They all are, except Pygmalion. But we're not going to go there right now. That's the name of the episode.
Okay. All right. Well, we did it.
We made it back.
We came back from the brink of death.
I stopped getting the promotional emails for podcasting stuff for the last couple weeks. We'll probably start getting those again.
Oh man, yeah. We got to get back on this horse. School started again, falling back into a rhythm because we got some good stuff coming up.
We really do, and I'm sure we got some kind of terrible stuff too. Like maybe this next episode we might have something that we both consider to be not so good.
Well, yeah, it's going to be weird because it's going to be very dichotomous. So next we're talking about 1982.
And interestingly, this is one of the very few years that Schuyler was around and I was not. There's only a couple
I
of them.
don't particularly remember very much.
No.
But that is technically correct.
Yes. But I do know that we are going to be talking about the top grossing movie, which was E.T. We're also going to be talking about the top grossing book, which was E.T.
The novelization.
Yeah, not anything unique. It was the novelization of the movie that also was top grossing. So weird scenario, but that's where we're at.
I think looking at this list, we also run into that in 1983 with Return of the Jedi and the novelization of Return of the Jedi.
Maybe that was a big thing in the 80s. I don't know.
I guess maybe. So here's my theory, and we can talk more about this next time, but VHS was only just coming in.
Okay.
So if you wanted to see or experience the story and you couldn't go to the theater, you had to do the book.
Okay.
You couldn't just watch it at home.
Luckily.
And so that's why there's this brief period in the early 80s where novelizations were really popular, and boy, am I glad that's over.
Yeah, and I don't know, but the top album, I don't know. Do you have that information?
I do. It's the self-titled album from the band Asia.
Oh, that's right. I've already been listening to it.
Yeah, so it's Asia by Asia.
So we're
top album of 1982.
We're literally only talking about 6 letters next episode. ETASIA. E.T. in Asia. That's a weird little pun. Sorry, I shouldn't do that.
Wow. I'm used to more letters than that. And just for this next episode, I did recently purchase a 4K Blu-ray of E.T. the Extraterrestrial so that I can watch it. I haven't watched it yet, but I mean, I've seen the movie before.
Yeah, I feel like I should experience it the most authentic way possible. I should check out a VHS player and the VHS of E.T., and I feel like that would give me the most authentic 1982 experience I could possibly have.
Can you also put it on a CRT television on a rolling cart? Because that's how I first saw it. I think at school, cart rolled into the classroom.
Okay, I thought I was crazy having that memory, because that must have been 1988. And they showed it school-wide. So I don't know. I thought I was going crazy and that never happened. But if you remember watching it at school, I would have been at the same school.
We would have been in the same school in 1988. I definitely remember that.
Okay, so I am not insane. Well, I mean, not with this
Well, I wouldn't go
scenario.
that
far. Okay, good. I'm glad that's not a fake memory that I have, and it can be backed up a little bit. So,
yeah, well, we can watch it with fresh eyes now,
yes.
The eyes of an adult,
yes,
as opposed to a child. Although maybe for a movie like E.T., that's not as good. We'll find out.
Why were they showing it to kindergartners? I don't know.
To fill time? I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
You can ask Mr. Foisey.
We can dig into that, and I can ask Miss Harith.
Oh, yeah. Track her down and find out why we did that.
All right, so that's next time.
Yeah, hopefully not like 7 weeks later from now.
Life hopefully is settling and solidifying, so it'll be a little more easy to do these more regularly, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'm glad we got this one out of on the books.
Yeah, me too, even if I didn't ever actually read the book.
And remember, 2003 for movies and music was a killer year.
Absolutely it was. All right, until next time. See ya.
Bye.